Hello, you sexy sat stackers, and welcome to the latest episode of the Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast. Last week, we mentioned how so many things can change in the blink of an eye, and that continues to be true. So much has happened since we spoke last, but the news notwithstanding, tomorrow is going to be the third anniversary of our very first ever Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast episode. Episode number 1 was a Bitcoin Bulletin weekend update that aired on July 25th, 2021. Our first DCA Wednesday episode came 3 days later on July 28th, 2021. And since that time, we've recorded 171 episodes, not counting today, including 156 DCA Wednesday episodes. Needless to say, we have a lot to talk about today, so buckle up. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as financial advice. All views expressed on this podcast are solely the opinions of the host and/or any guests that we might have from time to time. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or to follow a particular investing strategy. Last week, much of the world was talking about the events that had unfolded in a field in Pennsylvania and the many swirling controversies that have since unfolded surrounding it. However, the geopolitical world was shaken up yet again when the duly elected candidate on the other side of the ticket was forced to step aside. And speaking of politics, we are just hours away from the beginning of the Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, where 2 of the 3 leading candidates for president of the United States will be speaking, as well as a third party, Vivek Ramaswamy, who ran for the Republican nomination for president of the United States. And while I'm not a particularly big fan of Bitcoin Magazine, the organizers of that mega conference, or the conference itself, just because of some of the decisions they made last year in Miami, and because of the sheer size of the conference, and of course the expense of attending the event, but you do have to give credit where credit is due. Okay, so as I said in the intro, we have a lot to talk about today. But before we do, of course, let's take our customary look at Bitcoin's vital statistics. At the time of this recording, we are sitting at a block height of 853,775, and Bitcoin is ringing in at a US dollar price of $65,390 US dollars per Bitcoin. And that means that each US dollar that we convert into Satoshis will get us 1,529 sats per dollar. Bitcoin's current price gives it a market capitalization of $1.29 trillion, 0.2 trillion higher than last week, and just under the market capitalization of silver at 1.31 to 1.32 trillion, depending where you get that data. And for those of you who value your wealth in precious metals and shiny yellow rocks, to be specifically, it will currently cost you 27.2 ounces of gold to purchase just 1 Bitcoin. That is almost 1 full ounce more than you would have been able to trade gold for Bitcoin for last DCA Wednesday, as gold continues to trend towards zero in Bitcoin terms, regardless of what Shifty Pete likes to tweet about in the middle of the night. For those of you who value your wealth in pizza, 1 Bitcoin will purchase you 3,657 large pepperoni pizzas from Papa John's. That is 1 pizza a day, every day for more than 10 years. And that is certainly a heck of a lot of pizza. That is 1 pizza a day, every day for all of this halving cycle, all of the 2028 halving cycle, and all of the 2032 halving cycle. So as I've mentioned repeatedly on numerous episodes, beating this like a dead horse. We don't put horse on our pizza here, although I've been to countries where they do. The point being that if you attempted to spend 1 whole Bitcoin purchasing just 1 pizza every day, at least from Papa John's, and at current prices, you would never be able to spend that whole Bitcoin because, we haven't even begun to see this halving cycle's bull run, which really shouldn't get rolling with a vengeance till maybe as late as next Christmas. If history doesn't repeat, or at least rhymes, we won't be talking about the ultimate all-time high until sometime in 2025. And then, of course, it's going to do all that all over again in 2028 and then again in 2032. So without a crystal ball, we have absolutely no idea how much 1 Bitcoin will be worth on those dates. But if if history is our guide, Bitcoin's going to go to the moon here sometime at the end of this year, the beginning of next year. And then we have maybe a bit of a bear market or a sideways market. And then it's going to do it all over again in 2028. And if Bitcoin goes maybe 2 or 3x, whatever the all-time high this cycle ends up being, let's say Bitcoin goes to $300,000 per Bitcoin next cycle. And then the cycle after that, maybe that's when we hit $1 million per Bitcoin. The point being, every pizza that you purchase will cost you fewer and fewer Satoshis, to the point where you're not even putting a dent in your pile of Bitcoin. All right. That metric that has been my favorite metric for the majority of the time we've been doing this podcast, Bitcoin's 24-hour average transaction rate is absolutely humming. Currently looking at an average of 7.38 transactions per second, just a little bit slower than last DCA Wednesday. Of course, last Wednesday, the price of Bitcoin was on the upswing, and today it's down a little bit from where we were yesterday. It's still up from last DCA Wednesday, mind you, hence the whole zoom out thing, but that still holds with the trend of anytime we see the 24-hour transaction rate on the upswing, the price of Bitcoin correspondingly has been going up as well. And we've had a mild retracement in Bitcoin price and a mild retracement in the average number of transactions per second. So that metric still holds, although that's just a casual observation I've made simply by reading the statistic. Every DCA Wednesday episode for 157 episodes now, not necessarily any transaction analysis or anything scientific to back that up, but at least it's a fun metric to look at. And certainly the average transaction rate tells you how many people are using Bitcoin, or at least how many Bitcoin transactions are going on chain. It doesn't tell you a whole lot about the Lightning Network, other than maybe opening and closing channels. And speaking of on-chain activity, the Bitcoin mempool is a little bit fuller than it was last week. Last week, there were 109,101 transactions in Clark Moody's mempool on Clark Moody's dashboard. Currently, he's showing 133,152 transactions. That's 24,000 on-chain transactions, more than last DCA Wednesday. Mempool.space has a slightly larger mempool, and last week they were showing 167,863 transactions. This week, that's up by more than 150,000 transactions to 218,474. So definitely reflective of a lot more on-chain traffic, a lot more on-chain activity. Hence, those 7.5 transaction per second size numbers that we're seeing on average. And if you need to send an on-chain transaction and you want to guarantee that it is included in the next block, mind in the next block or two, Clark Moody's dashboard fee estimator is recommending that you include a fee of 10 sats per VByte. However, this is kind of refreshing. If you have a day to wait, if you have several blocks at least to wait, they're recommending a fee of just 3 sats per VByte. And they're saying that fee of 3 sats per VByte is the minimum fee they're recommending, even for a no priority transaction that you have up to a week or so to wait on. Mempool.space is saying that a high priority transaction only needs a fee of 4 sats per VByte. And that works out to just 37 cents in US dollar terms. And their fee estimator is saying that even those medium, low, and no priority transactions all need a fee of just 4 sats per VByte. That's about the first time in a long time I think I've seen them recommend the same fee, regardless of what the priority or on-chain transaction is. So that's pretty cool. And 4 cents per VByte, that's pretty darn cheap. We haven't seen them recommend 4 sats per VByte for a high priority transaction in months. I'm looking all the way back through my notes here, and the last time we saw anything even close was 5 sats per VByte over a year ago on July 9th, 2023. And that was just 1 week, because the week before that it was 14 sats per VByte. So, if you're one of those people that's been procrastinating on moving your Bitcoin to cold storage or consolidating some of those UTXOs you have, if you have some UTXOs that are so small that you worry that in a high fee environment, you might not be able to move or utilize that Bitcoin just because so much of it will be eaten up in mining fees. Obviously it gets cheaper than 4 sats per VByte, but not by much. 37 cents to consolidate a UTXO or to send money anywhere in the world, without anybody be able to tell you that you can't do it, or you can't send it to a certain person, or wanting to tax you or wanted to confiscate a portion of that wealth. That's pretty darn amazing. Imagine sending a wire transfer anywhere in the world. Imagine walking into Wells Fargo or Chase Bank and saying, I need to send a $200 wire transfer to Panama or to England or to Australia or wherever that may be, and say, and I want to pay 37 cents to do so. They're not even going to laugh at you. They're probably just going to kindly point you to the board above them that lists their outrageous fees for sending wire transfers and ask, next customer, please, because you ain't going to be able to send a wire transfer for 37 cents. I have a little bit of history with doing international wire transfers. A business that I've been involved in bought a lot of equipment that was manufactured overseas. And I'm the one that was responsible for sending those wire transfers. And we had some equipment that we actually purchased from China one time, and we had to wire US dollars to them. And it was coming up on the Chinese New Year, and they weren't about to ship our equipment until the wire transfer confirmed. And I had sent the wire transfer 3 or 4 days prior, but their bank in China wouldn't confirm it. It took like 14 days, more than 2 weeks, for that wire transfer to confirm with the manufacturer in China, and they were worried that they wouldn't get the money before the Chinese New Year because they were going to be closed for an extended period of time, and it would be like a month or more delay in me receiving that equipment. Our business receiving that equipment had that wire transfer confirmed even a day or two later. The point being, it took a heck of a lot longer than 10 minutes to send it, and it was a lot more expensive than just 37 cents. That's no exaggeration. I mean, that is for darn sure. Since our last DCA Wednesday episode, the difficulty it takes to mine the next Bitcoin block went up. In fact, it went up just mere hours after the last DCA Wednesday, and it went up by about 3.2%. As you may or may not be aware, the Bitcoin Core protocol adjusts the difficulty that it takes to find a block every 2016 blocks, which theoretically is about once every 2 weeks. And the goal is to have an average of one block coming in every 10 minutes. And if blocks are coming in faster than that, it makes it more difficult to find the next block. If blocks are coming in slower than 10 minutes on average, then it lowers the difficulties to speed those blocks up. Currently, we're almost exactly halfway between difficulty adjustments. There are 1,009 blocks until the next mining difficulty adjustment. It looks like that's going to be about 6.5 days from now, supposedly on July 31st. Again, that's not scheduled by anything other than the block number. So if blocks continue to scream in, then maybe it'll be a little bit sooner. If we have a couple of really, really extended blocks, then maybe it comes in August. But currently we're looking at July 31st. And depending on where you get your data, that's going to be a relatively large difficulty increase. It's going to be an increase of anywhere from 6.56 to 11.8% based on current estimates. And the reason why those estimates are so high is because blocks are currently averaging 9 minutes and 14 seconds, which is significantly faster than one block every 10 minutes. And that is because we've seen a lot of hash rate pour back onto the network. Of course, these are all just estimates, but again, Clark Moody's dashboard is estimating that there are 595 exahash securing the Bitcoin network, up from 588.2 exahash last week. So 6.8 exahash increase, that's only about 1%, right? So there's got to be more to it. But again, that's just an estimate based on how fast the blocks have been coming in. Of course, we were over 600 exahash back in June before the summer heat wave, the quote unquote heat dome kicked in, which basically just means it's summer and it's really hot outside. Dropped the exahash to, first it dropped to 620, from 620.8 to 603, and then we plummeted to as low as 574.1 exahash, most likely because, that big Riot mining facility in Rockdale, Texas, takes their miners offline when there's heavy power demand in Texas, so that electricity can be used by homes and businesses and hospitals instead of having rolling brownouts or blackouts like they used to have back before mining helped balance the grid, which is really cool. Yet another one of those myriad of things that we say Bitcoin fixes this on. But while it's still hot, it's 88 degrees here right now, and this is the evening. The sun has gone down, going down. It's getting dark outside. It's early to mid-evening here in Florida. And it's still 88 degrees Fahrenheit, which works out to about 31 degrees Celsius, which probably doesn't seem that hot until you factor in the fact it's also 88% humidity. And it's actually getting really hot in the studio here. I am back in the Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast studios this week. The last week I was recording at home in my bedroom because I was a little bit under the weather. My voice might seem a little scratchy still this week. It feels scratchy. It feels to me like I sound a little bit scratchier than normal sound, but I'm feeling great. I'm pretty much over whatever I had picked up in Georgia or Alabama last week. So I'm back in the studio. But one of my pet peeves about the studio is that the air conditioning in here makes a hum or a hiss that my noise canceling has a hard time taking out. If I were just recording dead silence, the noise canceling removes it no problem. But as I'm talking, it picks up the hiss while I'm talking. And then in between syllables where it's silence, there's no hiss. And I guess that's complicated enough that it makes the noise canceling software have a conniption fit trying to remove it. So I turned the air conditioner off. I'm also thinking that, I have a fairly nice mic. It's not a $500 or $600 microphone like, some of the more expensive podcasts use, but I'm not talking into a $25 microphone either. But I've had this microphone for a while, and being this close to the beach, I'm starting to have some issues with either my microphone or my soundboard. I also do a lot of photography and a lot of videos. I like to do video, high HD, 4K HD video of rocket launches. And I've been through a lot of cables, camera cables, and I've had connectivity issues with the hardware just because the salt is just hell on wheels when it comes to electronics. And I'm very, very, very close to the beach here, so I think even though this microphone's less than 2 years old, but it just doesn't sound as rich as it used to, and I'm wondering if it's about time to either upgrade mics or have to replace it, because it'd be a bummer if I come in here on a Wednesday afternoon, do an episode, and the mic is just garbage. So might be time to upgrade this microphone. Let me know what you think about the sound quality. I always love to hear from you. You can DM me on Twitter or X. We're at BTC Bulletin Pod, BTC Bulletin POD on Twitter. Let me know what you think about the audio quality. Sometimes I get comments on the audio quality, usually when it's horrific or there's some sort of issue with our podcast hosting service. But I am wearing headphones right now, and I think I'm hearing a little bit of feedback in the microphone. And it isn't the air conditioning unit because it's dead quiet in here right now. Maybe there's the hum of a laptop, which I have sitting on the other side of the desk, not exactly close enough to the microphone to be a factor. As a result, I am sweating like crazy. So if I'm doing all that and I'm still having that crackling noise that my noise canceling can't remove, then it's all for naught. So it'd be really interesting to get your opinion on what this episode sounds like. Again, you can DM me at BTC Bulletin Pod or send me a good old-fashioned email. And my email is bitcoinbulletin@protonmail.com. And I have that information in the show notes as well, regardless of where you're listening. If you just scroll down, all my contact information is there, and I'll reiterate it later in the podcast, as I always do. But I'm interested to see how this sounds, because I'm getting not feedback, but a little bit of a hiss or crackle or something in my headphones. I don't know if it's the microphone, the headphones, or if it's just in my head. Speaking of you and our listeners, I want to reach out real quick and give a shout out to those of you listening on your favorite podcasting 2.0 app, such as Fountain. For example, if you download the Fountain app, you can begin earning Satoshis for listening to your favorite podcasts. They randomly pick a number of Satoshis that you'll get per minute for the first several minutes up to the first hour of podcasts that you listen to every day, and you'll end up earning a few sats, not too many. But what you can do is you can send those sats to the podcasts that you are listening to, that you enjoy listening to help support them through the value for value model, where you can either stream sats on a per minute basis, or you can send a boost, which is a shout out, but it's a Lightning transaction. So you're sending that shout out with a Lightning transaction, a few Satoshis supporting your favorite podcasts. And we don't have any boosts to read this week, but I want to reemphasize a boost we received last week, because it was a really, really flattering boost. It was from longtime supporter of the podcast, Leggy. And I can't remember. I was so excited by this boost. It was deeply flattering, but I think I might have forgotten to congratulate Team Koblenz as part of this special shout out for winning the Meetup Meisterschafts Turnier, the Meetup Championship that they were in. There was a Bitcoin trivia night or whatever, and the podcast basically gave a tip of the hat to Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast. I'll read it again. It was a 10,000 sat boost from Leggy, and he says, "This week, a special thank you. Because of your podcast, our small team of Koblenz has won the MMT, Meetup Meisterschafts Turnier, meetup championship. I don't know why I keep going to say tournée like it's a French word and not a German word. I did that last week too. The final round was some quiz poker, and a lot of your statistics and informations were asked for. For example, how much BTC are in the ETFs? What was BTC's max market cap? When did HAL die, etc.? And then I think I got carried away thinking how cool it was that they gave us that shout out because, uh, it, I love to talk about Bitcoin. There's certain topics I can talk about all day long, and people are, if you're like me, you have family members who are just absolutely sick of it. And so I was excited to talk about that. And I was excited that we have somebody who enjoyed our podcast, that has found our podcast useful and was giving us partial credit for their Bitcoin Meetup team's championship win in the statistics. Then I went to mention that I've even been to Koblenz and that I think it's a beautiful town. And what I think I forgot to say was, congratulations, guys. That is really cool, regardless of where you got that data. And of course, it is all you. I'm glad that you give us a little bit of credit for helping bring you that knowledge every day. But it's really, really cool that you guys won, that you won the championship. So again, thank you for the shout out. I'm glad you enjoy listening to the podcast, and it's really cool. I do say, I've said this more often than not, that I think German Bitcoiners just have more fun than the average Bitcoiner. One of these days, I really want to go to one of these small meetups. We have that huge mega conference kicking off tomorrow in Nashville. 20,000 Bitcoiners are going to be there. And I've actually never gone to any of the Bitcoin conferences. I for multiple reasons, not the least of which is they're so expensive. I would rather just spend that money stacking sats. And the other is I've been to plenty of conventions that I had to go to for previous line of work, your Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of conventions. And they're just exhausting. You come back with absolutely no voice because it's so loud in there. And some of them are fun. Like I've been to the Great American Beer Festival several times, representing the beer industry. And you can't say that a beer festival isn't fun, right? But you're literally screaming for 3 or 4 straight days, depending on how many days you're attending if you're there on business. So you come back tired, hungover, and with no voice. And you really don't make a whole lot of connections because you have lines and lines and lines of people to go through, and it's just not the same as going to a small beer festival, in a little park somewhere where you can spend 15, 20 minutes talking to every person there about all the things you want to talk about. And so I'd really, really enjoy going to one of those Bitcoin meetups. I have a dream list of things I want to see when I eventually travel to Europe again. Like I want to stay at the Hotel Princess in Plockingen, Germany. I would really like to attend some of those Bitcoin meetups. Was it 21 has a few, the 21 meetups. I've just seen on Twitter a lot of things like where it's maybe 10 or 15 guys in some old castle somewhere drinking beer and just having a good time. And that's what it's all about, to me anyway. It's not about 20 or 40,000 person conventions. That's TradFi. That's traditional Wall Street. That's working in an office or in a gopher hole somewhere. That's an office space kind of meetup. And by all means, if you're in Nashville, have a great time. There's some after events and side events that I really, really kind of have a little bit of jealousy that I'm not getting to go to, because those sound a lot more fun, a lot more, a lot smaller, a lot more intimate. So again, I'm getting sidetracked once again. The only reason I'm even talking about this is because last time I got so excited about reading this boost, I was so flattered that Leggy would give us a nod for their win, for what they accomplished, that I forgot to say congratulations. So I'm going to say it one more time. Congratulations, Leggy. Congratulations, Team Koblenz, on your championship win at the meetup, I guess 2 weekends ago now. Speaking of you, the listener, our geographic distribution of listeners appears to have not changed. I host this podcast on Spotify. I did not originally host it on Spotify, but the company that was hosting our Spotify got purchased by Spotify. So I just kind of got rolled into the Spotify family. And they just forced an update to their iPhone app today. And while I have it downloaded, it doesn't function on my phone. And I don't know if that's me or them. So I can't get my statistics on the fly on my phone. I have to sit down at a computer and actually log into Spotify for podcasters. And so I don't necessarily have the up-to-date percentages, but last time I checked, I do know that countries stayed in the same order. It's just the minutia might have changed. Like I think the United States gained 1% of the listenership, but the other top 10 countries remained the exact same percentage, didn't budge. So the US picked up some listeners from somewhere, but not from anywhere in the top 10. Anyway, without further ado, the top 10 countries where you're listening from, our top 10 countries of listenership remain as follows. Number 1 remains the United States, where a little over half of you are listening from. So thank you to all my fellow Americans listening out there at any one of the 50 states. Hopefully some of you are having a great time in Tennessee tonight. Hopefully you're not dropping too many sats on that good time, because, spend in her place is obviously a good thing, but we're trying to grow that stack. Number 2 remains Argentina. So muchas gracias, amigos in Argentina. Number 3 remains Germany. So Dankeschön, mein Freunds in Deutschland. Number 4 remains Canada. So thank you to those of you listening up in the Great White North. Number 5 remains Luxembourg. So herzlichen Glückwunsch to Team Koblenz und vielen Dank für die netten Worte. Thank you. My German's gotten rusty. Thank you, Leggy and the team listening from either Germany or Luxembourg, wherever you find yourself tonight. Number 6 remains Spain. So muchas gracias, amigos in Spain. Number 7 remains Colombia. So muchas gracias, amigos in Colombia. Number 8 remains Mexico. So muchas gracias, amigos in Mexico. Number 9 is Australia. Good day, mates in Australia. Hope that's not too stereotypical Australian. Here in the United States, pretty much all we know about Australia is kangaroos, crocodiles, and Steve Irwin. A country I've never been to, predominantly because it's just such a long way. I do have friends down there. When I was in high school, as a matter of fact, the family across the street hosted a kid from Australia through the AFS exchange student program, which my family was heavily involved in the exchange student program. I don't want to dox too much, but I have some ties to that program. And so I've known many a kid from Australia that rotated through the AFS program. And it just looks like a great country. Another country that probably has just a lot more fun than the average American. I don't know. Maybe you always think that people in other countries have more fun. Kind of like, speaking of exchange students in the United States, or at least when I was a kid, all the exchange students got just bonus popularity from being exchange students, being from somewhere exotic. Whereas if you were just some random new kid who'd, moved from out of state or some other city to change high schools, it seems like kind of lost popularity points for it. So maybe it's the same way for us. We think that people in Australia are having more fun than Americans are just because of the exotic nature of it. But Australians certainly get a great reputation as party animals. And so thank you to all of you listening in Australia, or some of you that might be here this week because of the Bitcoin conference. Number 10 remains our cousins across the pond in the United Kingdom. I know a lot of people in the Royal Navy, business dealings with them. I'm not in the military industrial complex, but I was in a hospitality industry that had the privilege of serving lots and lots of foreign sailors. And those of you from the United Kingdom, we always had a really good time. Even though when you think of countries that are great places to party, off the top of my head, the UK isn't one of those that pops into it. And then that's just one of those unfortunate myths, because I know personally a lot of Brits that have they know how to have a good time. That rounds out the top 10. Venezuela dropped out of the top 10 a couple weeks ago. They had maintained a fairly high ranking. They were number 8 just a couple of weeks ago on July 3rd, but they're still lurking down there at 11%. So if you're a pleb listening from Venezuela, maybe you have a friend or a family member that didn't listen this week or didn't listen last week, or maybe it's you. Maybe you're on vacation and you just didn't listen. Listen twice as hard, and maybe you can bump your country back into the top 10. Of course, I kid on that. I appreciate each and every one of you, regardless of where you're listening, and it is truly, truly flattering that we do have listeners from all over the world. But we only read the top 10 because we don't have all day just to go over statistics. I've already spent probably way too much time talking about the vital statistics anyway. So let's get on to the news. Obviously, for most people around the world, whether you're a Bitcoiner or not, probably the biggest story of the last 7 days was the global IT outage caused by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike had an I guess it was late Thursday night here in the USA, just hours after we recorded the Bitcoin Bulletin podcast. I think I started noticing, I didn't have a blue screen of death on any of my equipment, but I started noticing a lot of people did at like 3 or 4 in the morning, East Coast time and Eastern Standard Time. But that would have been Friday morning in Europe. And fortunately, I think a lot of it was resolved, or were working through before most of the United States woke up, because the headlines were rolling in. Biggest outage in history. Microsoft crash wreaks havoc. World plunged into dark ages. Tech outage hits banks, airlines, firms worldwide developing. And we heard news that pretty much every airline in Europe was grounded. A lot of airlines in the United States were grounded, had many, many cancellations. Ironically, budget airlines like Spirit and Southwest Airlines were running such outdated technology that they were not affected by the outage, which is just hysterical. But hey, bonus points. The United States military, running their computer systems from the 80s, there's a plus for you. None of that went down. Another headline, hospitals around the globe hobbled. And I do have a family member that works at the local hospital here. And when they got to work that morning, they said all of their systems were completely down. That led to headlines like the next headline, canceled surgeries. CrowdStrike says not cyber attack, fix deployed, but could take weeks to repair. And other healthcare providers report problems with patient services. So that was a big, big oopsie. It was a huge lesson in the whole central point of failure thing, something that Bitcoin's decentralization provides robust protection against. We often hear the FUD, but what happens to your Bitcoin if the internet goes out? What if the power goes out for a month and doesn't come back? The average normie, they might keep their Bitcoin on exchanges right now, or perhaps even worse, on some mobile hot wallet. But that is not how Bitcoin is meant to be used. And the potential central points of failure, these potential centralized points of failure, are not weaknesses of Bitcoin. They're weaknesses of not using Bitcoin, but instead buying and trading IOUs. It's more of a weakness. If you want to tie it back to Bitcoin, maybe say it's a weakness in Bitcoin's user experience, that Bitcoin is still nascent and it's hard for the average person to use, which I think is absolutely hooey, because I have an 80-year-old family member who's been a Bitcoiner for 2 or 3 years. If they can do it, you can do it. Now, granted, I helped them and I coaxed them along, but I don't even live in the same state as they do, and they're able to pull it off. So if they can do it, you can do it. Either way, we're still very much early. We're very much in the equivalent of the America Online dial-up internet days as far as Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin UX goes. And as things progress, many of these things are going to evolve away, just like, checking your email and browsing different web pages. Back in the day, you used to have to connect to AOL and then use their app to load a web page, and you can only check your email through AOL, etc. But even in the meantime, the way things currently exist with Bitcoin, people have experimented with some pretty ingenious ways to send Bitcoin transactions. Of course, there's that Blockstream satellite beaming the blockchain from outer space, and while that's kind of a one-way deal, you can still confirm a transaction by receiving the up-to-date blocks using the satellite. People use mesh networks where they're not necessarily, you might not necessarily have internet, but someone who's connected to someone that you're connected to, who's connected to someone else that's connected to someone that has the internet, can pass your transactions along for you. There have even been Bitcoin transactions completed using ham radio signals, pretty much everything short of smoke signals, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone's tried even that. So basically what I'm saying is, even if the world were truly plunged into a Road Warrior-esque apocalypse, well, besides the fact that you'll certainly have a lot more to deal with than just worrying about your Bitcoin, even in the worst case scenario, it certainly wouldn't be Bitcoin's demise. As long as there's one copy of the Bitcoin core software out there, one node with a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, there is hope. You can eventually find a way to connect to it, and it can propagate again. Bitcoin can theoretically outlive a human extinction event, even if there's some node out there in the middle of nowhere, like Wally, waiting for someone to find them, or maybe some other, maybe AI to find them. Who knows what the future holds? But my point being, as long as there's just one copy of the Bitcoin protocol out there somewhere, the chain still exists. Anyway, this FUD has been especially amusing because when was the last time you heard someone say, I wouldn't invest in that Pfizer stock? I mean, what if the electricity goes out? I wouldn't buy that Tesla, maybe even more importantly. What if the electricity goes out? We have that happen in Florida. It's funny to watch people try and charge their electric cars after a hurricane when there's no electricity for a week. You see cars charging on generators in driveways, which is kind of amusing. The point being, this is just a FUD that they only ever use to try and scare people away from Bitcoin. The same FUD pretty much applies to the entire modern financial infrastructure. If the internet and the electricity go out forever, your US dollars are worthless. Good luck carrying gold around without getting robbed or mugged. Good luck finding anyone who even wants a shiny yellow coin from you, because A, they can't verify it's real. B, they can't eat it. The only thing they say that's going to have value if we really, really end up in a Mad Max post-apocalyptic future is going to be food, lead, maybe be the only precious metal that's worth anything, and maybe alcohol. So stock up on your whiskey. I'm just kidding. All right. So the big takeaway from the CrowdStrike apocalypse should basically be that Bitcoin didn't even notice. TikTok next block, Bitcoin marched on. Its price didn't crash. Its nodes didn't crash. And currently, let's see, Bitcoin is up about what, $2,000 from where we were last DCA Wednesday. It's down a little bit for the last couple of days, but it's certainly on the upswing. Anyway, I digress. Oftentimes, at least on social media or among normies, they say that the price is the news and the news is the price. You know, during even a Bitcoin bull run or a Bitcoin winter, even OGs, cheer on or at least fret about the price more than they should. But for those of you staring at price charts, the US value of one Bitcoin is down almost $5,000 in the last couple of days from where it was, the beginning of the week. But if you zoom out, even just zooming out 1 week to the last DCA Wednesday episode, Bitcoin is up. And the further you zoom out, the more Bitcoin is up. And as I re-emphasized last week, I believe Bitcoin is way ahead in price terms of where we would be in a quote unquote normal cycle, that Bitcoin got a bump from the ETF FOMO. And some of it's legit. I mean, it's supply and demand, right? But some of it was hype as well, and that's why Bitcoin exploded to a new all-time high. And had it not been for the ETF hype, though, we wouldn't have expected to set a new all-time high until sometime this fall, around Thanksgiving or Christmas, as I've always said. But even that aside, Bitcoin has its ups and downs. Bitcoin is just doing what Bitcoin always does. Even during those face-melting bull runs, Bitcoin has 5 to 7, 20 to 30% retracements, which is why we DCA. This is why we say slow and steady wins the race, that time in Bitcoin beats timing Bitcoin every time it's tried. And I firmly believe that this fifth halving epoch bull run won't truly get underway until later this fall or early winter. Maybe we go back to the new all-time high, maybe we go even higher, but we don't see that face melting bull run until much later this year, and that we won't see this cycle's ultimate all-time high until sometime in 2025. If we don't break out of the 4-year cycle altogether, and the whole hyper Bitcoinization thing, this whole super cycle theory where eventually the halvings just don't matter anymore. And that is something that I think eventually will happen on the path of hyper Bitcoinization, but I don't think it's going to happen this cycle. I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't happen for a few more cycles. And, that's a good thing because it gives you more time to stack. But at some point, Bitcoin will become so ubiquitous that there are no more massive supply shock hypercycles, that the halvings become less and less significant over time, and hopefully you will be on zero or off zero, depending on how you look at it, by then. Speaking of normies and the price, the US spot Ethereum ETFs officially began trading this week, and all you need to know to understand the Bitcoin and the ETH ETFs is that Bitcoin set a new all-time high when the spot ETFs were launched, with more than $19 billion flowing into the BlackRock ETFs alone. Ethereum, on the other hand, is down more than 4% today, 2 days after the ETF launch. The price of Ethereum is way down, and it's down more than 30% from its all-time high, which was back in November of 2021. Even though Ethereum tends to ride on the coattails of Bitcoin, it is still overall trending to zero in Bitcoin terms. And even with the launch of the ETF, you did not get a huge Bitcoin mimicking pump to a new all-time high. That's kind of eye-opening, because quite frankly, I mean, just having to guess, I would have thought, okay, maybe Ethereum sets a new all-time high, when the ETH ETFs are approved, because there's a lot of normies in there that don't know the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And some people are going to ape in, dumb money is going to ape in, but apparently it didn't. I don't have the numbers for today's inflows yet. It's still way too early. Those numbers usually come out much later at night, at least the sources I get them from. But while those numbers are not yet in, it looks like any ETH ETF inflows will be hugely outmatched by the hundreds of millions of dollars flowing out of the Grayscale ETH ETF. Just like with Bitcoin, the people who had their ETH locked up in Grayscale are dumping it like rats fleeing a sinking ship. They did the same thing with Bitcoin, but the difference is the other ETFs were soaking it all up. There were very, very few negative outflow days in the history of the Bitcoin ETF. It looks like we're going to have a pretty massive one in the history of the Ethereum ETF, and it's just getting started. For example, Farside Investors tweeted out today, the Ethereum ETF daily flow Grayscale flow minus $326.9 million. So ETH, the other ETH ETFs will have to have really, really stellar days to make up for the fact that $326.9 million worth of ETH flowed out of the Grayscale with what's now the Grayscale Ethereum ETF. This is obviously a Bitcoin show. It's Bitcoin Bulletin, not S-Coin Bulletin. But this is an important indication that the normies, the traditional Wall Street investors, are beginning to understand that there is a difference between Bitcoin and crypto. The hype, the people, the FOMO when the Bitcoin ETFs were launched, and the FOMO from the whatever FOMO there is for the Ethereum ETFs, they're night and day. That's not even a comparison. So to me, that's a big sign that the market is maturing and that people are realizing that there's Bitcoin and that there's S coins. And Ethereum is falling by the wayside in Bitcoin terms, and more and more people are putting it in that S coin category. At least that's what the preliminary statistics would hint to me. In the news, if you are familiar with the Fold card, with at least having the little app where you can spin their wheel every day and win a few Satoshis here and there, apparently Fold is making the big step of going from a privately held company to a publicly traded company. They released a press release today saying that they're going to be traded. I think it was on the NASDAQ. But at the very top of the release, the first thing they touted, the first big sentence under the title is that with over 1,000 Bitcoin in its corporate treasury, Fold is building the financial products of tomorrow amid a wave of global Bitcoin adoption. It's even in bold, so it's like a subheading. So the point being, they're not just saying they're going public, they're touting their Bitcoin treasury as what sets them apart from the crowd. Previously we're saying that, there's going to be another big MicroStrategy out there. Maybe it's going to be a Dell. I don't put Fold in that category. 1,000 Bitcoin isn't enough Bitcoin to be a MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor level. But not everybody can be a MicroStrategy. Not everybody can be a Michael Saylor. There won't. I mean, how many people out there can be whole Bitcoiners, right? 21 million. And because so many people, so many whales in particular, own so many Bitcoin, Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy notwithstanding, the opportunity to be a company that holds 1,000 Bitcoin is an opportunity that's out there for companies today, but it's an opportunity that will vanish rapidly as more and more companies adopt Bitcoin treasury strategies. So that's pretty cool. Apparently, they're accomplishing this through the Special Purpose Acquisition Company, or SPAC strategy. According to the headline on Bloomberg, Bitcoin reward firm Fold to go public via Betsy Cohen SPAC. And if you're wondering what that means, according to Investopedia, a SPAC, a Special Purpose Acquisition Company. A special purpose acquisition company is a company without commercial operations and is formed strictly to raise capital through an initial public offering for the purpose of acquiring or merging with an existing company. Also known as a blank check company, SPACs have existed for decades, but their popularity has soared in recent years. In 2020, 247 SPACs were created with $80 billion invested, and in 2021, there were a record of 613 SPAC IPOs. By comparison, only 59 SPACs came to market in 2019. So basically, it looks like they're instead of jumping through the hoops it would take to go public, they're merging with one of these blank check companies started by SPAC veteran Betsy Cohen. But either way, the end result is the same thing. They will be a publicly traded company, and they'll be a publicly traded company with 1,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Reminder, Fold is not a sponsor of this podcast. We have no sponsors of this podcast other than you from time to time by streaming sats or by sending boosts. But, and this is a but, just like when we're going to talk about Cash App a little later in the podcast, if Fold is a product that you are interested in, there is a referral code in our show notes. At the time of this recording, if you sign up to use Fold via our referral link and make your first purchase using your Fold card, you'll receive 20,000 sats just for doing so. The podcast will receive 10,000 sats in return. So that's a great way to help support the podcast while getting paid Satoshis to do so. Again, not a sponsor, but if you're interested in Fold, you think it's cool, you're not using it yet, that's a you do you thing. It might not even be available where you're at. I use it. I've used it for a couple of things. I use it because I don't like to use my normal debit card on vacation, especially in tourist traps or out of the country. And so I loaded money up on my Fold card to use when I was on vacation in the Caribbean and the Bahamas. And back then, what you could do that for free without, being a Fold Plus member, which was like $10 a month, a Spin Plus member. I don't think you can do that for free anymore. But back in the day, I got 2% back in Bitcoin for those purchases on my vacation. And I had no interchange fees, no international fees for using my debit card. Those things I do believe have changed. And I don't want to tout something that may or may not exist. What I do know is at the time of this recording, they're offering you 20,000 sats for signing up and using your Fold card once. And so by using our referral code. Again, if you're looking for a way to help support your favorite podcast, hopefully it's this podcast, please consider using the referral codes in our show notes. And there's referral codes for more than just Fold down there. If any of those countries are of interest to you, might as well get paid something. If you're going to sign up anyway, you might as well get something for nothing, right? All right. Speaking of Bitcoin tech companies, or in this case, tech companies getting involved with Bitcoin, No BS Bitcoin ran an article dated today entitled Proton Launches Proton Wallet, a self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You might be familiar with Proton Mail. We use Proton Mail here at the podcast. In fact, our email, if you want to contact us, is bitcoinbulletin@protonmail.com. The article goes on to say Proton, the privacy-focused Swiss technology company, is launching Proton Wallet, an open source, end-to-end encrypted and self-custodial Bitcoin wallet. The article says the key features of Proton Wallet will be your keys, your coins. Proton Wallet is a non-custodial wallet, and we utilize end-to-end encryption to ensure that we never have access to your Bitcoin. Privacy friendly. The wallet rotates public addresses every time a user sends or receives assets, a transaction. That's got to be a typo because I cut and pasted this. This way, you can't use a blockchain explorer to track all past transactions associated with specific public address. So more and more wallets are doing that for you automatically. If you're using a wallet that lets you reuse addresses and at least doesn't give you a warning saying, hey, you're about to reuse an address and maybe dox your privacy, make sure you do your research in using a wallet that allows you to do this. And apparently Proton Wallet will be one of those companies. The article continues on their list of listing their key features. Bitcoin via email. As long as both the sender and recipient have a Proton wallet, you only need the recipient's email address to send them Bitcoin. That also means that if you are one of the millions of people who have a Proton Mail email address, you can now automatically receive Bitcoin with your email address. Then it goes on to say, even if the recipient does not have a Proton Mail email, as long as they have a Proton account, which can be created with third-party email addresses like Gmail, Outlook, iCloud, etc., and are using Proton Wallet, you can send and receive Bitcoin with them via their email address. So that's pretty cool, Bitcoin by email. Maybe help out with some of that user experience, UX, that we were talking about a little bit earlier when we were talking about where Bitcoin is in terms of adoption. It says you can buy Bitcoin securely in 150 countries. Proton Wallet also has integrations that make it easy to buy Bitcoin in 150 plus countries. It is open source and publicly auditable. It has 24/7 human support and enhanced security with Proton Sentinel, which uses advanced machine learning and AI that analyzes millions of logins to detect and block malicious login attempts with high accuracy. This enables Proton to protect your account even in situations where you have already been compromised and an attacker has gained access to your login credentials. So I don't know how good that will be coming out of the box, but that sounds like a good idea. They wrap it up by saying Proton Wallet is operated by Proton Financial AG, an independent Swiss subsidiary of Proton AG, whose primary shareholder is the nonprofit Proton Foundation. So pretty cool development. A not cool development, and this is kind of in the rumor column, a slightly darker note. If you've probably seen on Twitter, a lot of people talking about a European asset registry. This has stirred up a lot of attention in the last day or two, but it's something that has its roots in something that dates back all the way to 2021, as old as this podcast. According to the European Parliament's website, the Commission commissioned a feasibility study for the creation of a EU-wide asset registry in a public invitation to tender of July 16th, 2021. So even older than this podcast. The value of the tender is euro 400,000 excluding VAT. The central registry will collect and store a wide range of information on bank accounts, securities, company shareholdings, land registry entries, and valuable assets. So I think the reason this stuck its ugly head up again is because Lynn Alden retweeted a post yesterday by a post on Twitter from @BitNorbert, where BitNorbert He posted a link. Well, it's a screenshot and a link to Focus DE saying, register all your valuables in a central EU register to help with financial transparency. Bank accounts, shares, cars, precious metals, Bitcoin, works of art, your tacky Rolex. Register it all so we can fight money laundering. Coming soon, comma, maybe. And I clicked on that link, and they have since backpedaled on that article. I think that if you click on the link that BitNorbert tweets out, it comes up with an article saying that there's no evidence this is coming. And that's good, because this is Orwellian as fudge. This isn't about Bitcoin. It's about keeping the rich rich and the poor poor. It is flat out about communism. It is also the sort of thing that Bitcoin can circumvent. Granted, it would make you a criminal, but since when has that bothered the cypherpunks who invented Bitcoin to circumnavigate authoritarian government control in the first place, making transactions on the Silk Road, for example? This, however, is what people like Christine Lagarde probably had in mind. Remember when she called Bitcoin an escape hatch? Or what globalists like Augustin Carstens have in mind when they talk about total granular control over every dollar, euro, or peso that you possess? And it is certainly the wet dream of those who advocate for a central bank digital currency. But it is something Bitcoin fixes. In the meantime, however, if you are a European, you should be extremely outraged about this, and you should let your elected representatives know, because while they're saying this might not be something that's coming imminently, it is, at least according to the European Commission, something that they're studying, that they're considering. Do not let them sneak this by you, or you will wake up and find yourselves living in a country that you do not recognize. Naturally, of course, they're using this they're touting this as a tool to protect you from terrorism, as well as to protect you from Putin and from other oligarchs, because you need to tell the EU that you own a 1996 Toyota Corolla and you have 300 euros in your checking account so that Putin doesn't win in Ukraine. I'm only half kidding here. There are a bunch of articles out there, most of them are a couple years old, that say exactly that. That's the reason why the EU is pursuing this, is because if they're going to go after and sanction people, they need to know everything they own so they can seize it. And there is shockingly, very little coverage of this in the mainstream media. In fact, almost every article I can find even mentioning it is from the original articles back in 2021 when the study was first launched. That, however, doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep your eyes peeled and your ears open, because this is probably exactly what they have planned for you. If not this, something very similar. I wouldn't be surprised to see. I know that the current administration of the United States would absolutely love something like this if they thought they could get away with it. We already have, similar laws encroaching that direction, where you can't transfer $10,000 of any asset to anybody without your bank turning in a report to the government saying what you did and why you did it. And that number, is something that was only supposed to apply to the rich when it first came out. That was more than the value of a house, but they didn't raise the limit despite the fact they inflated the currency way, they debased the currency way to where now $10,000 won't even buy you a Toyota Corolla. Not a new one anyway. All right, on to what makes today and every Wednesday so special, and that is that today is DCA Wednesday. And what is DCA, you might ask? Well, DCA is an investment strategy where you invest your money in equal portions at regular intervals, regardless of price. For example, this is going to be our 157th stack. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been doing this for 3 years now. We started all the way back on Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. So 4 days short of 3 years, but by our next DCA Wednesday, that date, our anniversary date, will have passed. So far, we've stacked 156 times for a total of $3,120 converted into a stack of 9,612,844 sats. And we did it at an average purchase price of $32,456.58. To grow that stack, as usual, we're going to use the handy dandy Cash App. As I mentioned with Fold, Cash App is not a sponsor of this podcast, but we do have just like anybody does, if you sign up for Cash App, if you're already using Cash App, you have your own personal referral code to share with friends and family, and we have one as well. So if you do not use Cash App and you want to use Cash App, please consider using that referral code. That's another great way to help support the podcast while getting paid to do so. I mean, if you're going to sign up for Cash App anyway, you might as well get the bonus, right? Because you don't lose anything for getting the bonus. All you do is lose the bonus if you don't sign up with somebody's referral code. Anyway, as usual, I seem to have money in my Cash App. I don't usually keep a lot of money in there, but I have $20 in there today. So it is a simple matter of clicking on Bitcoin, tapping buy, entering $20, tapping confirm, and boom, just like that, we just stacked another 29,000, bummer, less than 30,000 sats. Another 29,932 sats. That brings our total stack up to 9,642,776 sats. And it raises our average purchase price by $106 to $32,563.24. But our 9.6 million sats are currently worth $6,298. And considering we've only invested $3,140, that is not too shabby. And if Bitcoin finds itself at the $100,000 mark later this year, that stack, without adding another single Satoshi, will have a US dollar value of $9,642.77, almost triple what we've converted into Bitcoin. If Bitcoin hits $1 million, that stack will be worth $96,427.76. And as if those at Fidelity have suggested, Bitcoin ultimately hits a purchase price of $1 billion US dollars, our stack would be worth $96,427,760. And that is not too shabby, considering that we've only been converting 20 US dollars a week into Bitcoin, and that we've done that in just 3 years. Before I go, I want to ask you to help support this podcast by feeding that algorithm monster. The easiest way you can do that is by rating and reviewing this podcast on whatever platform you are listening via. You can also follow us on Twitter at BTC Bulletin Pod. The more followers we have, the more likely it will be that someone sees our tweets and maybe gets turned on and orange pilled. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, although we haven't posted any videos in quite a while because we do mostly audio podcasts. And most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. So please reach out and let me know what you think, or just say hi. And do so by DMing me at BTC Bulletin Pod. Or if you're old-fashioned and you just want to send me an email, you can do so at bitcoinbulletin@protonmail.com. I do read that email and respond to every email we get, and it would be nice to hear from you. But either way, don't forget to join us next Wednesday and every Wednesday while we continue to grow this stack together, just 20 US dollars of the fiat at a time. Until that time, though, keep on stacking those sats, you sexy sat stackers.